Hello fam, welcome back to the channel. This is Precious Styling. If you're a new subscriber, you're very much welcome to the family, and if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for always stopping by. So in the previous video, I showed how I drafted and cut out the pattern for this beautiful dress, and in this video we'll be exploring the sewing process. So before we go on, if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, you may want to hit on the subscribe button so you can stay updated whenever I post new sewing tutorials. And if you haven't given the video a like, please do so as soon as possible. And without delay, let's get started. In the previous video, I showed the drafting process of this dress, and in this video I'll be showing the sewing process. For the cup, I have cut out 2 pieces of this cup on the lining, and I gave allowance to this side here and allowance to the top part, 0.5 inch allowance by the way. For this piece, I didn't give allowance to the sides, I only gave allowance to this top part here, and I gave allowance to the curve of the cup here. And I cut this piece on fold, as you can see. And for the front and back yokes, I cut exactly what we drafted on the pattern. I didn't add any allowance to this. And I cut out 2 pieces each for the front and back yokes. As for the back piece, I didn't give allowance to the sides, I only gave allowance to that top part there, and everything I cut on the lining, I replicated it on the fabric. Now to the yoke, I'm going to take out the fabric and I'm going to place the fabric right size facing me, and I'm going to place the lining on the fabric, and I'm going to stitch along these areas. I would stitch right here and through there and come down there, but I'm not going to be stitching the base, and I'm going to turn this inside out. I have stitched the areas I mentioned. I'll just be snipping the pointy ends of the yoke so that it would have a pointy end when I flip it to the right side. Backstage, I used the lining to cut out the main fabric, and this is what I have. So for this back piece here, I'll be bringing the yoke which I've already ironed backstage, and I'm going to be placing the base of this yoke on the armhole area of the main fabric, just this way. But I'm going to be turning it upside down, and I would place my lining on the fabric, and I'm going to stitch it right from the sides to the top and to the sides again, but I won't be stitching the base so that it would be easy to turn the fabric to the right side. I have stitched the areas I mentioned at the back, and I have turned it to the right side. So this is what I have. This is how it looks like. So I gave this a good press backstage, and if I turn this to the other side, you can see that I have ironed and folded in the zipper allowance area, and this is how it looks like. For the cup area, I decided to number the pieces and give arrows to these pieces so that I don't mistake one for another, and I'll be slashing through these pieces. I have arranged the pieces on my fabric, and I spread out each piece. I doubled this fabric so that I will have 2 pieces of this. I gave each piece a space of 1 inch, and I just pinned it down so that it stays in place, and I'll be cutting out the fabric using the pattern as a guide. So I would bring the middle piece and I would open it up. For the cup, I'm going to take out the main fabric, and I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and run double loose stitches all along this curved part, and I'll do same for the lining piece. However, I'm going to be leaving the threads of the stitches hanging out at both ends of the stitches. So let me bring this up close. Backstage, I ran 2 basting stitches along the base of this cup, and I'll begin pulling the threads of the stitches in order to create gathers. So the aim of this gathers I'm creating is to make sure the cup fits into the shape of the middle piece that you see there. So I'll keep on gathering this till it forms the initial cup size before we slide slashed and spread the pattern. So this is just what I'm doing. Basically, you keep on dragging it till you achieve the original size of the cup. At this stage, it seems like the cup would fit into the area it's supposed to fit into, so I'm just placing it in that area to see if it's going to fit there perfectly. And as it is, it seems like it would fit there perfectly. I also ran basting stitches across the base of the lining, and I'm going to be pulling and gathering this just like I did for the main cup. After creating the gathers, this is what we have for the main cup, and this is what we have for the lining. For this piece, I'll be marking 0.5 inch away from the armhole area, away from the peak of the midsection, and that is where the sewing of our cup is going to start and end. And the same thing applies to the lining piece. So I'm going to place the cup right size facing me, and I'm going to place the lining on top of the cup. So I'm going to be joining it in such a way that the lining and the cup would come to the same size. So I'll be pinning one side of the cup just to keep it in place, and I'll also drag the lining to the other side of the fabric, and I'm also going to pin that. At the top of the cup, I'm going to be making pleats in order to adjust it to the size of the lining piece. So I'm just going to make about 2 pleats at the top there, and that would be okay so long as it aligns to the lining piece. So I'll be stitching along the top part of the cup, and I'll also be stitching this side of the cup. Feel free to use your pattern as a guide, because at some point it may get rather confusing. So before you stitch the top part, endeavor to put in the yoke. Okay, just put in the yoke into the cup. Align it just the way the yoke is supposed to be on the pattern, and just insert it this way so that you can stitch on top of it when you're running your stitch across the top of the cup. As you can see, I have sewn the top and this side, and I'll just be taking out the pins because I'll be snipping the pointy ends so that it can be sharper when I turn it to the right side. And this is what I have. Lest I forget, I didn't stitch this little opening you see at the side of the cup, which also represents our center front, because that is where our tie would be inserted. So I have this string, this strip of fabric here, and I'll be inserting that into the cup. I will just insert it so that the little end comes out of the cup a little bit, and I'm going to stitch on top of that part. I have stitched up that part, and now I'll be turning it to the right side, and this is how it looks like. I'll be giving this a press so that all the edges come out clean. I have ironed the cup, and I'll begin aligning this cup to the curved part of the middle piece there, right from the point we marked. So I'll just do this all the way to the side, and I'll stop at the point where we marked at the side as well. So once we finish pinning the cup to the fabric, this is what we're going to have. So I'm going to repeat the process on the other side of the cup, and I'll show you the result. So after pinning both cups, this is what I have at the back. So I'll be taking this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to run a stitch that cuts across both cups. I have finished stitching the areas we talked about. I'll take out the pins. I would flip this to the back and I would bring in the lining, and I'll begin aligning this lining to the armhole area of the dress. So I'm just going to place it at the sides this way and pin it down because I'm going to be stitching that area, and I'll do this for the other side of this dress. Note, would be pinning and stitching the armhole area and sides for now. As you can see, I have stitched this part. I have also stitched the other parts here. So we're going to look for a way we can cover the raw edges of this part. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the lining piece and turn it to the back. Okay, just watch carefully what I'm doing. So I'm going to bend that lining now to the front part. Now that is at this point, I'm going to follow the curve of the raw edges with the lining. So just watch what I'm doing. I don't know how to explain this better, but I think the video would be more explanatory. An easier way of achieving this is taking the peak of the midsection of the lining now towards the peak of the midsection of the back. So you're just going to place those pointy ends together, and then you are going to begin following how the lining curves with the fabric. And if you've watched this far, please give the video a like, and if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please do well to subscribe to the channel. Thank you. As you can see, I have pinned this along the curve in the opposite direction. So I'll be taking this to the sewing machine and I'll be stitching along this part from one point to the other. After stitching those areas I mentioned, I turned it to the right side and I gave it a good press so that everything stays flat and neat, and this is how it looks like at the front. So now I'll begin imputing my measurements on the front and back pieces. So I'm just going to shape this up to my size. I would place the front piece on the back piece, right sides facing each other, and I would begin imputing all my upper body circumferential body measurements. And I'll take it to the sewing machine and sew along these lines. Also, I'll be pinning the front and back yokes together because I'll be taking this to the sewing machine as well to stitch that area with about 0.5 inch sewing allowance. I have attached the front piece to the back piece, and this is what I have. Like I showed you earlier, this is the strip of fabric I'll be using to make my ruffles, and this measures 10 inches. So you can make yours longer if you want it to be longer, or you can make yours shorter according to what you want. You can also make yours very wide. For me, I have about 160 as my width, so I'm just going to piece these fabrics together. So I have a very long piece of fabric, so you can keep on attaching your fabrics together. So after stitching my fabric, this is what I have joined all the fabrics together, and I have a very long strip of fabric. So right now I'm going to be sewing on top of this area. I'll be running 2 basting stitches, and I'm going to gather this up. So this is the flare that we cut earlier, and I'll be opening this up. I'll bring over the ruffles that we have gathered, and you can see how the gathers are at the top. So I'm going to place the gathered side of this fabric, right size facing the right side of the fabric, to the base of the flare, and I'm just going to arrange this, align everything so that everything stays in place. And I'm going to be pinning this down first so that it stays in place, and I'll be taking this to the sewing machine later on to run a stitch up to the end of the flare. I've stitched the gathers to the flare, and this is how it looks like at the front. So this is also the way it looks like at the back. You can see where I stitched everything together. At this stage, I'll be attaching the upper bodice to the flare. So you would want to get the mid part of the bodice as well as the mid part of the flare. So once you get the midpoint, you are just going to place the fabrics right sides facing each other to the midpoint, and from there you begin aligning the waistline of the upper piece to the waistline of the flare, and I'll be using my pins to hold the two pieces in place. So when you do that, you will take it to the sewing machine and you stitch it down. I would also be pleating the allowance we gave to the flare when we're cutting out the flare. So I'm just going to make about 4 pleats, 2 pleats on each side, and that would make the waistline fit to the waistline of the upper part of the dress. I have attached the upper part to the flare, and this is what it looks like. I'll be taking out the pins, and this is how it looks like at the front. We'll be closing up the dress this way in order to attach our zipper. I want to define where my zipper is going to end. So I want my zipper to end somewhere above the hip line. So I just marked where I wanted the zipper to end, and from the point I marked, I'm going to be sewing it all the way to the hem of the dress, leaving the zipper part open. After stitching the area I mentioned earlier, this is how it looks like. Okay, this is how it looks like. So now I can go ahead and start attaching my zippers, but I'm going to do this backstage and show you the results. I have finished attaching the zipper, and this is how it looks like at the back. This is also how it looks like at the front. So I'll just go backstage and serge all the raw edges, and at this stage we can practically say we're done with the dress.
And if this video was helpful, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.